If you have topics you would like to have us discuss on the Aging Well podcast, please click on the links in the episode description to send us a text or record your message or comments. We'd love to hear from you and how we can help you age well. If you benefit from the Aging Well podcast and would like to support the content financially, please click on the Support the Show link or support our affiliates and advertisers. Welcome to the Aging Well podcast. I'm Jeff Armstrong here with Corbin Bruton. In this and the episodes that follow, we will share candid discussions on aging and hear from the experts. We are here to inform and encourage as we experience, aging. Today's guests are Drs. Keren Brown Wilson, CEO of the Jessie F Richardson Foundation and of Age Plus, and Walter Dawson, an assistant professor at the Oregon Health and Science University School of Medicine, faculty at Portland State University's Institute on Aging, and a senior Atlantic Fellow for Equity in Brain Health with the Global Brain Health Institute at the University of California, San Francisco, and Trinity College, Dublin. I was introduced to them via an op-ed that appeared in the December 10th, 2021 issue of MedPage Today, titled, "Who Will Take Care of Our Aging Population?" Join with us as we discuss the elder care system and the current crisis of compassion. You both have very interesting stories and passion areas, Keren with assisted care living and Walter with Alzheimer's and dementia. I hope to have an opportunity, obviously, to explore these more with you in detail and hopefully subsequent interviews. But today I'd like to focus on the op-ed and the concept of compassion fatigue in elder care. And I would say healthcare in general, because I think you'd definitely agree that over the course of the last 2 years, there's just been an exacerbation of compassion fatigue in the healthcare industry, not just in elder care and so on. But before we dive into this, though, could you please share just a little bit about yourselves? Keren, would you like to go first?
Sure. Well, I've worked with older adults since I was an undergraduate at the University of Washington, which is 40 plus years. So I've never really worked with another population. Most of my work was in the field, for the first 20 years of my professional life, was in the field of assisted living. Spent a lot of time working on getting Medicaid coverage for assisted living services. And the last 20 some years, I've been working on both internationally and in the United States, mostly with rural population, using asset-based community development techniques to help communities increase their capacity to support older adults in their community. So my whole life has been about working with older adults. And on the side, I'm an adjunct professor at Portland State University.
Great. And Walter?
Sure. I'm assistant professor at the Oregon Health and Science University's Latent Aging and Alzheimer's Disease Research Center and a senior Atlantic Fellow for Equity in Brain Health with the Global Brain Health Institute, which is a joint collaboration between the University of California, San Francisco and Trinity College, Dublin in Ireland. I'm a brain health and aging policy researcher. My work really focuses on the intersection between kind of macro level health policy and more kind of on the ground health services research, focus on supporting older adults, but in particular individuals living with dementia and family care partners. I've also worked extensively within the public policy arena, both in Oregon and nationally. And I really think there's a need for policies to be based on kind of evidence and research, and whether or not that happens as much as it should is certainly another question. But I think that's in part my interest in kind of connecting policy work that I've done with the research work that I do. I'm also a lifelong advocate for people living with dementia. Father was diagnosed with Alzheimer's when I was 9 years old and spent most of my childhood and youth as a family care partner. And in nursing homes and memory care communities, which I think is a kind of an unusual role for a child. So but those experiences really kind of informed both my advocacy work and my policy work and the research that I do now in my current work.
So I'd like to add, since Walt told the reason why he was in this field, is that those people that know me know that the reason I started assisted living was because my mom was in a nursing facility. And she asked, when I told her I was going to become a gerontologist, she said, well, why don't you do something to help people like me? So that's been the motto of all the work that I've done, both in assisted living and in community-based development, in terms of finding ways to help support older people live their fullest lives.
So what is compassion fatigue or compassion exhaustion?
Well, I think what it is it's a feeling that you have done all you can do and it's not enough. And furthermore, people seem to think that you didn't do all you could do. So it's a sense of physically and emotionally and mentally being exhausted and feeling unappreciated, misunderstood, and maligned.
Okay, and certainly healthcare and social care systems have taken a huge hit during COVID. And what is the extent of the staffing shortages, and do you think we'll be able to recover from this?
Well, Wald and I have we think there's some really big solutions that are needed. But what I would tell you right now, there are facilities, licensed settings that cannot admit people because they cannot staff.
Yeah.
That happens in hospitals too. It's not just in long-term care settings. So we have people that cannot go to places to receive the care they need because there's no staff. We have FEMA working. We have Defense National Guard people working. We have out-of-state agency people working. And still you can't get enough staff to staff of all kinds, of aides, of nurses. And you know what? The bad part about this is a problem that we have known about for a long time. It's just 5,000 times worse now.
So I'm not sure if you well, Walter, do you want to add to that?
Well, no, I would just add, yeah, I think that as Keren said, that these are issues that have been well known, the shortages, the potential shortages that were projected in aging care and long-term service and supports, but the pandemic has amplified them and made them occur that much quicker, right? And that's just something that we're hearing a lot about the workforce challenges, and we're hearing about how that's affecting many sectors of our economy. We're hearing about how that's affecting the supply chain, right? But we're not really hearing about how this is affecting long-term service and supports, or the impact it's having on older adults. And I think that's what we're really trying to raise awareness of, that of the challenges that are facing the workforce, that are both not getting enough attention but have really immediate consequences.
So I'm not sure. I mean, I almost kind of read the answer to my next question in your answers to the previous question. But is there cause for optimism, or is there cause for pessimism in the current situation?
I think if you would talk to people trying to find workers right now, they feel very pessimistic. I think that the real issue is, it's not that we can't figure out some things to do. It's that it's not something that you can just say, okay, we'll get more workers. We haven't built a pipeline. We don't have a pipeline. So we don't even if we pay more money, there's no pipeline to hire workers. And so the pessimism in me comes from knowing that we're not thinking long term about a problem that will only get worse as the population ages in our country.
I discussed my epigenetics test with True Diagnostic co-founder Hannah Wendt in episode 162. Epigenetic testing measures baseline and changes in your pace of aging, giving you the power to steer your anti-aging or health and wellness journey in the right direction. I learned that I am aging well. Click on the affiliate link in the episode description, use the promo code AGEWELL, and receive a 12% discount on your epigenetics test and monitor your pace of aging. I kind of garnered that from your article that, looking at the statistics and, the amount of doubling that's going to be happening, not only in the aging population, but also in those that are going to require assisted living. It does certainly paint a picture of pessimism. And, I'm also an academic. I teach specifically in exercise science. And so a question I would have for you both is, what can I do in my role as an academic, specifically exercise science, to help ease the burden?
I mean, I think one thing that you could do in your role, and which you are in a sense doing right now, is helping to draw attention to this issue, right? Um, I think I would say yes. There's a lot to be pessimistic about, but there is also opportunities here for substantive change, right? The pandemic is an opportunity for change. I think we're at an inflection point here as a community, as a state, and as a country, and we really have an opportunity to rethink that the way we approach a lot of different systems and policies, particularly the way that we provide care for older adults. Um, and there is this immediate need right now, of addressing the workforce challenges, right? But there's an opportunity here to do more to create a better society. And I I think we do have an opportunity to really rebuild our 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 aging care system as a result of the pandemic. Um, so in that sense, I see some optimism, right? As there in that's a difficult and tall order. That's a difficult task, but I do have optimism there. But in order for that to happen, there needs to be attention and awareness drawn to this, and so that's how um, someone like yourself and others can help, is really to understand and draw attention to these issues. That's one way, at least.
I think the challenge is finding a strategy that really highlights the fact that just because older adults have Social Security or Medicare or sometimes occasionally Medicaid, that they're okay, they're taken care of. Um, we're working in a system that was created in the mid 1960s, and it's not structurally appropriate for what our needs are today. We've not had any substantive change in how we are approaching the supporting of older adults, and in recognizing and incorporating the assets that they bring to the community. So we have this narrative that, number one, they're taken care of because they get these things. Number two, um, who wants to hear about death and dying, and when they're no longer able to contribute? Both narratives are not true. So we have these myths around aging that make it really hard to engage people in constructive, positive, productive conversations about how to reframe our approach to aging.
Like both answers there. And I also wholeheartedly believe my role as an exercise scientist is to be on the preventative end. I mean, we know we're going to have a population that is aging, and healthcare keeps them alive longer. We need to find the ways to make those years as more productive and as healthy as possible. And, trying to educate the healthcare profession, I think, in terms of helping people to remain healthier, and addressing health not as a health care, but more as a preventative health approach. so that our aging population is as strong and as healthy as possible as they go into their final years. My father-in-law passed away a couple of years ago of Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's, and they were fortunate enough they had the income. He had been a banker in New York. They retired to Florida. They moved into a community where they were able to move from a nice kind of house in a retirement community into a complex that had activity for the older adults, and the assisted care and the memory care was right there on site, so that when my mother-in-law could actually go down and visit him daily with ease as he was declining. And I mean, that was the best possible scenario for somebody. And I know that's not the opportunity for the majority of the American population. And as we look at kind of how health has declined through COVID, with obesity going up and inactivity and everything else, it is really a multi-pronged approach that we need to take. And I'm hoping that more of my students will take, kind of cross campus a little bit and take a few of the gerontology classes and begin to focus on, approaching the older adults rather than I just want to work with the young athletes in the gym, and build bodies and six pack abs and all that stuff. Is we need to be focusing on building a healthier population. I told my students a couple years ago, I went to American College of Sports Medicine, and they were honoring a number of the senior fellows in the organization. And I saw these gentlemen walking around, and many of them were, shuffling, very kyphotic, very frail looking. And I'm like, that shouldn't be how we as exercise professionals should be looking in our older years. And it kind of really shifted my focus to, what do we need to do to get people stronger and healthier and more active as they age?
Well, that's a really interesting question and worthy of a long conversation in and of itself, because when we're planning recreation, when we're building housing, we're not actually designing things to actually help people use the to be able to function as well as they can in those. So we make it hard.
Yes.
For them to remain physically active. If you have trouble with your knees, we don't have transportation systems. We don't have accessible housing. And so we actually make it harder for people to stay fit. And that is something that is the need to think more comprehensively about how every discipline. As an academic, what I would say to you is there is almost, I won't say no, there's virtually no discipline that couldn't use a few courses on aging. Because if you're in business, if you're in law, if you're in exercise science, if you're in psychology, sociology, you are going to have customers or consumers that are going to be older.
Yep.
And yet that's not how our educational system works either.
No. So again, you're painting more pessimism.
No, I'm not.
No,
I'm thinking it's just time for another revolution.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with Karen that the interconnectedness between, and this is becoming more clear to me in my work, and has become even more clear as a result, I think, of the COVID-19 pandemic, but the interconnectedness of aging and also my work in brain health, but in really thinking about how the different types of policies always need to take into account aging, right? And this is both from trying to address the negative and the challenges that exist, but also the opportunities, right, as well, and the positive aspects. But that's a key, I think, piece of thinking about policymaking, is that almost every single policy issue affects aging.
Yeah, and if you think about the workforce, I read something, I don't know if it's true because I didn't see the source, but it says that when we talk about the Great Resignation is mostly older people. And if that's true, then we're really in a world of hurt because that's where our most potential is because there's more of them. But if you even look at how we have an older population that feels outmoded in the late, particularly with all of the new stuff with technology and remote work and all of those things. And yet we don't really have a strategy for adapting, let's say, our training and our education for adult learners. We should.
Yeah.
Because we need them. We need them to work and be productive, whether it's paid or unpaid, right? And that impinges on the whole caregiving problem. I mean, because we have so many women in particular who are unpaid caregivers. And as their parents hit the peak years of needing support, women, it's not just a child care problem for them. It's an elder care problem.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't hear about that. We hear about the need for child care credits. We aren't getting any elder care credits, are we?
Not at all.
So that's what I mean. When people are not thinking lifespan, they're not thinking intersectionality. They're not thinking that they're not thinking broadly about how this issue spans across generations. And it's not enough to just say pay people more. That we have to rethink our whole approach to supporting older adults and helping them support themselves. I mean, by the type of housing we build, by the transportation systems we create, by the support services that are available to them. So it's like, it is possible.
I think we've tended to be much more reactive rather than proactive in almost all policies when it comes to government. But, in particular, this area in healthcare, I think it's always reactive rather than being proactive.
Yeah, that's true. Like, I mean, often our response to things is based on an immediate challenge that's in front of us, right? And it's hard. It's difficult, both as individuals and societies, often to plan for the long term, right? And to be forward thinking. But that is really what we need to do. But it's not just about forward thinking at this point. It's an immediate issue now
Mm-hmm.
too, right? But that is an inherent kind of barrier that does exist. But it's also, as I think this is something that Karen alluded to, and you did too, Jeff, is that there's really a stigma surrounding aging that exists, right? And that is in itself a barrier to addressing a lot of the issues and really being much more proactive in our planning and our approach. And trying to really break through that stigma is essential. But that's a real societal barrier that has kind of downstream impacts on policy. It has the way we interact and approach aging issues. That's needs to be kind of broken through is the best way to say that, right?
Well, it's sort of like some people say that ageism is the last ism that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it is, there's a stigma attached to workers who work in long-term care as opposed to acute care. It's like, oh, you're a long-term care nurse. Well, you must not be good enough to be an acute care nurse. Oh, you're a caregiver. You're a paid caregiver. It's almost like, ew. And that in itself is that in itself is bad because there's an assumption that people who do this aren't good enough for something else or don't care Well, those are not true. Those things are not true, and they're hurtful in terms of creating a workforce um, that that can get the job done. You know, the society is the society's attitude towards aging and towards people who work with older people is a real contributor to this issue. And it's there's in my view very little recognition of this disdain um, for people who work directly with older people. It's a very strange thing because there's all this, oh, we love our old people unless we actually have to do something with them, right?
Yeah. Now, do you find that to be, you're starting to work a lot more internationally. I noticed you were doing some projects down in Nicaragua and some other areas. Is it something that is a little bit more American or United States than we might see abroad, or is it something that's becoming a bit more universal?
I think it's both. I think, for example, in Nicaragua, where I've been working for more than 20 years now, what we see is that um, older people, families leave them, like they migrate from the countryside to the more urban areas. They leave them behind and they leave their children with them, just like we have a lot of adult kids now who have mental health issues or whatever, leaving their kids with their parents to raise, grandparents raising grandchildren. That's true there too. The difference is that when the kids are old enough to work, they leave the grandparents and go to the city, and then the grandparent is left alone without support. So, and there's virtually no governmental system of support. So if your family doesn't take care of you, you don't get taken care of except through almshouses, what we used to call almshouses, charitable institutions. Um, when the family is intact, I think there is more respect and more integration of older people into the family structure than there is here. But don't think this is a modern problem for the United States. This has been going on since day one in the United States. If you look at census data, you will see we never had multi-generational households in the United States. As soon as the kids were old enough, they built the house next door. I mean, it's a myth to think that we were used to be all these multi-generational households. That's never been a culture in the United States. And although people think that it was, but the census data tells us differently.
That's interesting. I never really thought of it in terms of everybody being in the same household, but we've had communities, or at least it was perceived we had communities where people generally stayed in the same town at least. And now that has gotten even far worse. So you're saying we've gone from never really even being in the same household to now maybe not even being in the same state.
Correct.
Which is a situation, kind of my family has been in. I mean, my siblings are all spread out. I'm in Oregon. I have one in, one's in Maryland, one is in West Virginia, and the other's in Iowa. My dad's in Arizona. My mother was, before she passed away, was in Maryland, and she moved down to, my sister insisted, my oldest sister insisted she move down, so that she could kind of take care of her, but still they weren't in the same household. My mom lived in an apartment that, I don't think was the best of care for her. And in the end, it was really probably one of the worst things for her. And so it's increasingly challenging, but it's also obviously a problem that we have long had in this country. So
I think that there's some really interesting efforts um, to try to bring people together in thoughtful ways. I don't think it's realistic that we're all going to live in multi-generational households. But I do think that there are good ways to bring people who want to be with people of other ages together. That's it's, the older people are just like every other group of people. I mean, there are more differences within those 65 plus than there are between 65 plus and 45 plus. I mean, that's a well-known piece of statistical information. There are greater variances within than across. Right,
Well,
Walt?
That's right. That's right.
I always share with my students that when I had my stint as a personal trainer, my favorite clients were always the elderly. I had one gentleman who was 84, had never lifted weights in his life, and had come across the Tough study. This would have been in the late 80s, well, mid to late 80s, and decided he didn't want to walk with his cane anymore and was going to gift himself with a personal trainer. And I worked with him for about 3 months, and it was so much fun. He shows up the first day. He's got, like a dark blue polo style shirt on, Bermuda shorts with a belt, high ankle socks on, and brown loafers to exercise. Not what you typically see. And he came walking in with a cane, and you remember Tim Conway's little bit when he did the elderly gentleman that shuffled really, really slowly. Well, that's how slow this gentleman walked. And within about a few months, actually had him walking much more briskly, wasn't using his cane. But all those clients that I worked with, this was at a Jewish community center in Pittsburgh, that they all had great stories to tell, and they wanted to share those stories. They were so alive. They were there for a different purpose than, your younger person that's going to the gym to socialize or to, change their appearance for whatever reasons they want to change it. These were people who just honestly just wanted the activity and the social interaction and everything else. And I tell my students, if you want to work with a fun population, focus on the elderly population. And that's where the jobs are going to be too in the future. So tell us about caregiving corps. What role can a creation of a caregiving national service program play in kind of reframing what we do in senior care and care in general, I guess, in both the U.S. and abroad?
Well, we've had a Job Corps, we've had an AmeriCorps, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why not a Senior Corps? I mean, there. This might make me sound a little bit like an outlier, but I say, oh, you'd like to have free college? Give us 2 years. National service, you can go into service corps and you can become a part of this. Because we need so many people to do so many jobs that they can be paid, they can earn college, or they could be after college where they do it for the service of America. Maybe they take a break between undergraduate school and graduate school. Or maybe they don't, maybe they get a down payment on a house. They get a bonus payment. I mean, I think there's all sorts of ways where we could help people, expose them to different types of work. It's not all just, giving baths or serving meals to work with older adults. There's all sorts of work that needs to be done that could help relieve the acute shortage, just like it has in although it's not working so well right now, the teachers, the AmeriCorps and the teachers.
Mm-hmm.
That's I think people, and they don't have to be young either. They don't have to be 18. That's what they created the Peace Corps for, remember?
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't all young people that went into the Peace Corps. So it's a matter, it's a half measure of service and a half measure of exposure to a new type of work, and a half measure of just for the heck of it, go someplace else.
Yeah.
Walt, you want to add to that?
Sure. I would say, as an alumni of the AmeriCorps program, I'm very a strong proponent of that type of model, right? And I would say, I think in part of our suggesting this is that we're thinking of a way that helps reduce the stigma that we've talked about surrounding aging and long-term service and supports and working in long-term service and supports, right? While also helping address this kind of wider, immediate economic and workforce challenge. And, I would say that I think that both programs like AmeriCorps and Peace Corps are great examples to build from, but they both are not quite large enough, right? Like, and have not had as much impact on our society as they could or perhaps should. And so but there's an opportunity here to really make this a larger, really robust program that could have that impact and reduce that stigma and really help create that workforce that's needed.
Sounds like it would inspire that workforce as well. Somebody might do it just for the couple years to pay for college or whatever it might be, but you get involved with that population and you have a passion and a compassion for that population, you stick around and you make a career of it. I think it's a great idea.
Well, the other part of that too is, let's say that you do spend 2 years doing this, and then you decide to go off and be a lawyer. You decide to go off and be an engineer. You haven't forgotten what you saw and what you learned in working with this population, and it will influence your thinking about your your other work.
It's very true.
Yeah. Yep. I like the word, the inspiration too. That's I think a good way to describe it, or a good way to think about it. It's inspirational and guiding and providing it's something that, yes, can guide and shape your thinking and your work beyond, or could do that. Yep.
And I'm hoping that's kind of what purpose this podcast is going to help serve a little bit as well, to get a little bit more of that inspiration and information out there. I would certainly be a champion of a caregiving course. So anything that I can do to support, let me know. So also in the op-ed, and I kind of missed this, the first reading through, but my co-host caught on to it and was like, I don't know about this. But in the op-ed, it mentioned robotics in certain aspects of care. How is technology being used, and how should it be used in providing care for our growing senior and vulnerable neighbors?
Well, actually, they are using robotics, for example, in Japan a lot, and in other countries. But robotics do. We already have robots in a lot of our lives. We have robots that vacuum. We have, robotics that turn down our temperature. It's a different kind of robotics.
Mm-hmm.
Lock our doors, right? Turn on our lights. There's a lot of work that could be done this same kind of way that would free humans up to do the really important person-to-person kind of things. So there's nothing magical about why couldn't robotics do part of the cooking, or certainly the cleaning?
Mm-hmm.
Why couldn't robotics do more of the maintenance? Why couldn't robotics do more of the pill counting? Why couldn't robotics do more of the administrative task? To leave the humans to do the service planning, the personal activities, the things that make people feel human.
Mm-hmm.
And none of us would oppose having more robotics to take care of some of that stuff in our lives.
In fact, we probably go out and buy them, right?
We do go
How
out.
many people are getting the those little robo vacuums for Christmas this year? But
So I'm just saying, it's like that doesn't mean that you have a. Although they do have robo service animals,
Mhm.
They fetch papers. They do things for people.
Mhm.
And I would say that if we would broaden our thinking, we would think lots of things could be done by robotics, and leave humans for the more important work of the human relations part of the work.
And from the sounds of it, it's not like they're taking jobs from anybody, right?
No, no.
But I must say, when I kind of read the robotics piece, I kind of flashed to the Jetsons and their maid.
Well,
Well, as hard as it is to find housekeeping help now, it might be glad to have a
Yeah.
robotics person run that vacuum cleaner.
you know, I think there's a growing use. There's clearly a growing use of technology within aging care and within healthcare more broadly, right? So I don't think this is a much of a stretch to think that that this is going to continue to develop, but needs to be supported. And I think there's some real barriers to access that need to be thought through, as well as there's some real regulatory issues to think about too, right? And ensuring that protections are in place and technology broadly, but that's probably true of the use of robots too. We're using technology to support the care that's provided already, right? So that's what this is, a way to continue to support the workforce and support the provision of care, right? That's and that human piece of it is always going to be important.
And again, I think it's an opportunity to be proactive.
Yep.
And think ahead of what they're doing, so we don't get twisted around and suddenly we've opened up the elderly to be hacked and to have people get into the system. I don't know, I'm starting to have that kind of twisted critical technology side where the elderly have been so vulnerable to scammers and things like that this isn't an opportunity for people just to have better access to getting into, say, accounts and computers and things like that. But it sounds like a really great opportunity for tech people to kind of start developing things other than video games and social media, to start putting some of that to a use that might much more benefit the aging population.
For sure. And protections do need to be put in place. That's what I was kind of alluding to by talking about
Yeah.
regulations. It's making sure there are protections, but there is a real opportunity here to provide more. But there's going to be barriers, and a lot of technologies, and perhaps including robotics will need access to broadband internet, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's a real issue for lots of populations, particularly rural populations, for example, across our country, and in Oregon specifically. But I think approaching this with that kind of clear view of of those equity issues and barriers that exist, and trying to mitigate them as best as possible is an important part of that focus.
Great. And so for the aging adult and those who have aging parents, how should we plan for living out our remaining years? What kind of advice do you have for people kind of planning into that future rather than, again, being reactive?
Uh, Boy, there's so many things. I think if I had to pick one thing, I would say maintain your relationships, because whether you have money or don't, whether you have good health or not, whether you have a nice, safe place to live or not. At the end of the day, you need relationships. And so things that help people connect and stay connected is probably the single thing that people can do without money, without good health, and wherever they live. It's harder if you don't have money. It's harder if you live in a remote place. It's harder if you're frail. But staying connected helps people remain cognitively engaged, emotionally engaged, and often physically engaged. And those are all really important parts of aging well.
That's great advice. I mean, we tend to think, just put money away, put money away, put money away. But maybe build up that emotional bank account, with people, and, building the social relationships that, if the money doesn't last, there's still people that care about you. I mean, that human connection lasts when the money doesn't, hopefully.
I, well, I mean, it's nice to have an accessible home. It's nice to have an adequate income. It's nice to have access to health care. But at the end of the day, what COVID has taught us is how deadly loneliness is
Mm-hmm.
for all ages.
Isolation, social isolation is, yeah, that's one. We hope, I think, that COVID, that the pandemic has brought that, yeah, the attention to that. We know that is harmful. It's clear, and hopefully that has brought that into the spotlight, and can help us both know what to do as individuals, but also what we can do as a society and as a country to better avoid and mitigate that, right?
That's good. So for yourselves, what do you do personally to age successfully?
I keep working.
That's good.
Yeah, I mean, I think both the interconnections and social relationships is essential. I think keeping a focus on um, uh, purpose is something that is important at all stages of life, but will continue as one ages. That's will be essential. Um, Absolutely, and yeah, I mean, I think there's other things that I try to do. I try to think about the connection of physical health with cognitive health, long term, right? And that um, the reality is it's a lot to kind of be concerned about, right? For folks when there's so many challenges and hardships in life, right? But um, there is a need to try to be aware of it, right? What and aware of the positive that it can have, what the things that we can do to have some impact, right? And there are both, and this is with work in brain health about modifiable risk factors, right? Like engagement, social engagement, purpose, healthy lifestyle choices. It's all important, and I do. I mean, I try to keep a focus on that for sure. But
Well, as we wrap up, is there anything you'd like to say in kind of conclusion or summary for today?
Oh, I have one thing, but I'd have to send you the link. The organization that I'm the CEO of, called Age Plus, is doing a statewide survey asking people about what is needed to age well. I would love to get that information out to your listeners. So
Absolutely. I'll share that in a link with
I'll send you a link.
That's perfect.
And they can do it in January.
Okay, perfect. And I'll do it myself.
Wonderful. Every response counts.
Good. Anything else? Well,
Yeah, I would just say again, I think we're at an inflection point here, right, as a society, and it's really an opportunity to really think about how we approach aging, right now, and there are some immediate needs for change, but there's an opportunity here to think and be proactive about what we can do for our society, and kind of rebuild in the wake of the pandemic. But there is a moment right now for that. This is that moment.
Great. Well, thank you both. I think it's been a great conversation, and I hope it's the first of many. Hopefully this could become a platform for you to kind of further, your opportunities to speak out for our elder population and policy change, and anything that you might want to have a megaphone to, stand on a soapbox and scream out. And you're always welcome to kind of come onto this site and, use this as an avenue for that. And I will definitely include in the notes along with this podcast the link to the survey. And anybody listening to this, I expect that you will take the opportunity to not only take the survey, but to share it with others so that we can get some good data so that we can help people age successfully. Thank you both, and I look forward to having you both on the show again sometime soon. Thank you for listening. I hope you benefited from today's podcast, and until next time, keep aging well.